Iron Man may have been laid to rest in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, at least until Robert Downey Jr. needs another big payday, but in the world of comic books, Iron Man is surprisingly still kicking after going through a lot over the last several decades, which is why today's list is the top 10 most ridiculous things Iron Man has survived. Coming in at number 10, we have the time that Tony Stark faked his own death in order to keep his secret identity safe. During the Armor Wars event, which saw Iron Man trying to destroy all of the Stark Industries technology he had sold over the years, the iconic Avenger was put on the world's most wanted list for interfering with multiple nations' militaries. Since Tony Stark's alibi at the time was that Iron Man was actually his bodyguard, Tony had a fake biography and confession note written for a fictional man named Randall Pierce, and then faked this made-up bodyguard's death so that the Iron Man secret could be kept. Definitely an odd way to end an Iron Man crossover event, especially considering how public Tony would be with his secret identity just a few years down the road. Coming in at number 9, we have the time that Tony Stark erased his entire brain just to thwart Norman Osborn. Following an action-packed few years in the Marvel Universe that saw both Civil War and the Skrull invasion, the former Green Goblin had become the head of a new team of Dark Avengers. To protect all of the superheroes he had exposed during Civil War, Tony deleted all of the superhuman identities from the Superhero Registration Act, and implanted the data within a hard drive in his brain, making him Osborn's #1 target. To prevent the Green Goblin from gaining all of this knowledge, Tony eventually wiped his entire brain clean, relying on a backup of his brain to restore most of his usual memories once Norman had been safely locked up and taken care of. Coming in at number 8, we have the time that Iron Man was electrocuted by the God of Thunder himself. Tony Stark has made a lot of iffy choices in the comics, but few have been as disastrous as his attempt at a Thor clone. Intended to be a powerful deterrent against Cap's team during the Civil War event, this clone called Ragnarok quickly went out of control and caused the deaths of several heroes. Whenever the true Thor returned, he was furious at what Tony had done with his genetic code and fried every system in the suit of Iron Man armor, leaving Tony to walk back to Avengers HQ, humiliated and defeated, with one of the most decisive superhero smackdowns in comic book history, in a fight that Tony should be grateful he was still capable of walking away from. Coming in at number 7, we have the time that Iron Man flew a nuke through a wormhole. The end of the original Avengers film is one of the defining moments of the MCU, as Earth's mightiest heroes finally team up for the first time to put an end to Loki's Chitauri invasion in New York City. Faced with overwhelming odds, Tony Stark was ready to sacrifice himself by flying a nuclear missile launched by S.H.I.E.L.D., intended to take out the infection in New York, and instead shooting it through the wormhole to the Chitauri mothership. And while Tony would be lucky enough to survive the explosion and fall through the wormhole back to Earth, he would remain traumatized by these events for years to come, suffering from both survivor's guilt and existential terror at just how big the threats from beyond the stars could become. Totally not foreshadowing for Thanos, right? Coming in at number 6, we have the time that Tony got full-on punched by Captain Marvel. Which, honestly, with the amount that Iron Man seems to get into conflict with other superheroes, we're surprised this hasn't happened more often. During the climax of the event Civil War II, neither Tony Stark or Carol Danvers were willing to budge on their positions over the use of a future-seeing Inhuman. And thus, Carol finally unleashed her full power to take Tony out with a single punch. And while at the time it seemed he was just knocked unconscious, it turns out that Carol's punch was so strong that it killed Tony's physical body, with his consciousness having to be backed up and placed inside a cloned replacement. Talk about learning how to handle a punch. Coming in at number 5, we have Tony sacrificing himself by flying directly into a psionic storm. During a period of time in which Marvel was looking to reboot their comic book universe, the villain known as Onslaught was waging war against the entire 616 plane of existence. A combination of the darkest parts of both Professor X and Magneto, Onslaught was a creature of pure psychic energy that was only able to be defeated when the Hulk managed to finally rip open his armor. Unfortunately, the only way to stop Onslaught was the destruction of the universe, a dramatic sacrifice that Tony and the Fantastic Four decided to make as they flew directly into Onslaught's psionic body, ending their universe and kickstarting the highly controversial Heroes Reborn storyline. Coming in at number 4, we have the time Tony Stark intentionally stopped his own heart to save his life, because the logic behind that totally makes sense. Tony's had his fair share of bad relationships over the years, but few have ended as poorly as his romance with Kathleen Dare, a woman who took Tony's playboy ways incredibly personally and would eventually get back at Tony by shooting him in the chest. Paralyzed from this attack and suffering from severe nerve damage, Tony decided to stop his own heart so that he'd be placed into cryostasis until a solution could be found to his nerve damage. Unfortunately, Tony didn't tell many people what his plan was, causing many of his friends to believe he had died for good. Not great communication skills there, Iron Man. Not great. Coming in at number 3, we have one of the most controversial Avengers storylines with the time Tony Stark replaced himself with a younger Tony. In the event known as The Crossing, a variant of the time-traveling villain, Kang the Conqueror, known as Immortus, began using the neural link in the Iron Man suit to secretly begin altering Tony Stark's brainwaves throughout time. Over time, Tony's morals were slowly eroded until he was an active threat to the rest of the Avengers team, a sleeper agent for Kang the Conqueror. While his teammates would try and return him to the side of good, they eventually were forced to ally themselves with a younger Tony Stark from the past and permanently defeat the corrupted, older Iron Man. And while eventually this younger Tony would get retconned into being the true Tony Stark all along, this is still an intense example of just how dangerous Iron Man could be if he ever broke bad. Coming in at number 2, we have the time Iron Man and Captain America fought at the end of all existence. No, I'm not talking about the Civil War event, but rather a larger battle between the former friends during an event that saw the Marvel multiverse beginning to collapse in on itself during a storyline known as the Incursion. With both the Marvel and Ultimate Universes destroying one another as they collided, Cap was shocked to learn that Tony had known about this imminent destruction for years, and had been secretly trying to prevent it with the Illuminati rather than letting the rest of the Avengers know. This betrayal meant that Iron Man and Captain America spent their last moments in this universe punching one another, before eventually reality was reset into a new battle world. And finally, coming in at our top spot, we have the time that Iron Man got decapitated by the partner of Thanos. The battle for the Infinity Gauntlet in the MCU might not have ended with Tony Stark's survival either, but at least in the movies, Tony got to be reassured that they won first. In the comic books, Iron Man has a lot less to do with Thanos' eventual defeat, as during the final battle against Thanos, he's apparently killed off-panel by the recently created partner of Thanos, Terraxia, offering the torn-off head of the Iron Man armor to Thanos as a romantic gift. And while Tony would be restored to life once Thanos was defeated and all of his evils undone, it's still wild just how thoroughly he was beaten by the partner of the Mad Titan. That's all the time we have for today's video, so thank you all so much for watching. As always, I've been Josh Busker, and I'll see you all next time, Nerd Squad.